How you doing, guys? Back again with another video. So in this one I wanted to take a look at depth of field. What type of shallow depth of field, or bokeh shall we say, can you create using with smartphone external lenses? So I've got a few different choices now that I'm going to show you so that you can get a good idea if you're watching this video and you're looking for a lens just to be able to create that shallow depth of field, just to make that smartphone footage just pop a little bit more, look a little bit more professional. Then I'm going to show you the different lenses and what's going to achieve the best amount of bokeh. And just a quick one before we jump into the video, if you haven't subscribed, consider doing so. Everything I do on this channel shot just using a smartphone. So if that's something you're interested in, trying to get top quality footage just using a smartphone, then consider subscribing. So all right, let's jump into it. So I've got a variety of different lenses I'm going to be using this one. We've got the case 135mm, the B-script 3x tele lens. We have got the Sandmark 60mm telephoto lens, the Sandmark 60mm wide angle lens, the Beast grip wide angle lens, and also the anamorphic lens from Moondog Labs. So a variety of different lenses so that you can see what's going to achieve the most depth of field. So the way I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to keep my phone stationary in a tripod and just swap out the lenses. We're going to start at each lens's minimum focus distance, and then we're going to gradually just move the tripod further and further back until that light and everything else is in focus with each lens, so that you can get an idea on how close each lens needs to be to create any shallow depth of field, and also how far back can you go with those lenses before you lose all the shallow depth of field. So a variety of different lenses. Really looking forward to making this one to show you which lenses can achieve the most shallow depth of field. You guys probably can guess which ones are going to achieve the most already, but let's find out. Let's jump into the video. Okay, so first up we've got B-script's 3x tele lens, and the lens is currently sitting away from this light at about, I would say, 500mm or half a meter. So this is very, very zoomed in at the moment, you can see, but we are creating, if I just move this around here, we are creating some really, really nice shallow depth of field there. So you can see that background is completely blown out, really nice. But again, we are about half a meter away from the light stand itself. So that's the B-script 3x tele lens. Now we're roughly about a meter away from the subject. And as you can see, we're still getting a nice little bit of shallow depth of field in the background there. Background's looking nice and blurry, not completely blown out, but still you're getting a really nice shallow depth of field there with this B-script 3x tele lens. And again, we're about a meter away from the light. So this is the B-script 3x tele again, and as you can see, I'm probably about 2 meters away from the light now. And as you can see, we're still getting quite a nice little bit of shallow depth of field there. The background's starting to become a little bit more in focus now, but the subject that we're trying to really capture is still popping. This is still a good looking shot to me with nice background blur, and again, about 2 meters away from the light. So now this is the B-script 3x tele, and again, we're probably about a good 3 meters away now, so quite far away from the light itself, and everything's really starting to come into focus now. The background away from the actual light itself is probably about 2 meters away from the light as well, just for reference. So obviously I think if that light was there and there was the background was way further away, we would still get a little bit of shallow depth of field, but in the space that we're actually in, 3 meters away from this light with a 2 meter backdrop away from that, I still think it's starting to come into focus now. There's probably ever so slightly a little bit of background blur. This, for me now, this lens is done. Okay, so this is the case 135mm lens, and this is basically the minimum focused distance that I can get with it being focused. And we are roughly about, again, 400 to 500mm, so roughly about half a meter away from the light itself. And you can see that the background is really, really blown out on this lens as well. But you'll probably notice that the B-script lens, from my eye, from looking at the screen now, looks that little bit sharper than this lens does. But again, you are getting a really nice background blur, and this lens is essentially half the price of the B-script lens, so it's holding up pretty well. Okay, so this is the case 135mm lens again, and we're roughly about a meter away from the light, and you can still see we're getting some really nice background blur there. The light's looking nice and sharp. This lens does seem to suffer from a lot of distortion, and out towards the edges it does start to get very, very soft, almost blurry, and that's probably also what's contributing to that shallow depth of field. But dead center of this lens is as sharp as a pin, so yeah, it's looking good. Still got a really nice bit of background blur going on there. So let's move it back a little bit further, shall we? Right, again, this is the case 135mm lens. Now we're currently sitting back at about 1.5 meters, and we've still got a little bit of background blur going on there. The light's nice and sharp. And yeah, the shot's looking good still. So I'm going to just move this one backwards again. Now we're currently sitting back at around 2 meters, and you can probably see the background. I mean, there is a little bit of background blur going on, but I do believe that's just the softness of this lens in the corners there. The image is still sharp in the middle there, and if you look just to the left-hand side of the light, it looks a little bit out of focus, but almost in focus. So I don't think this lens is going to have much more in it in terms of bokeh, but I'm going to move it back now to the 3 meter mark, and we'll see how it performs there. Okay, so I've moved the case 135mm lens back to the 3 meter mark now, and basically everything's in focus. So again, around 2 meters is about the furthest away you're going to be able to get from the subject and still create a little bit of shallow depth of field. Okay, so this is Sandmarc's telephoto lens, their 60mm telephoto lens, and I am probably roughly about 400mm away from the light itself, and you can see it's creating quite a nice little bit of shallow depth of field in there. The light still seems to be fairly sharp across the board, so that's great from this lens. It's looking very nice and sharp. So let's move it back to roughly about 1 meter now and see how that performs. Okay, so I've moved it back, and now we're roughly about 1 meter away from the light with Sandmarc's lens. You can see there, we're still creating quite a nice little bit of shallow depth of field in the background there. The light is nice and sharp, so the lens is sharp as a pin, and we're still getting a nice bit of bokeh in the back there. So let's move it back a little bit further and see what happens. Okay, so we've moved back now, and we're probably about 1.5 meters away from the light itself, and you can see there we're still getting a little bit of background blur going on there. I don't think this lens has got much more in it, but still 1.5 meters away from the subject, and you're still getting a little bit shallow depth of field there. The lens is holding up pretty damn well, I'd say. So let's move it back a little bit further. Okay, so now we're back roughly about 2 meters away from the light itself, and I would say that this lens is now pretty much done in terms of background blur. So I'd say that the maximum amount of distance you can get away from a subject and still get a bit of background blur there is about 1.5 meters. So, you know, from a little 60mm telephoto lens that screws directly onto a phone case, I think this does a very, very good job. Okay, so now I'm using B-Script's wide angle lens, and this is as close as I can physically get to the subject, pretty much without actually touching it. The phone is probably about 4 inches or 100mm away from the light itself, and you can see we've got a little bit of background blur going on there, looking quite nice, especially for a very tight up shot. And again, this is the B-Script 3x tele lens, and now we're roughly about 1/2 meter away now, so where we started with the B-Script 3x tele lens, and you can still see that we are still getting a slight little bit of background blur going on there, so it's not too bad. 1/2 meter away, the light's framed up quite nicely in the center, and we're still getting a little bit of background blur. So I'm going to move it back a little bit further. Okay, so this is the B-Script wide angle lens, and as you can see from this shot now, everything is in focus. I'm roughly about 1 meter away from the light, and the background's not blurred at all anymore. So with a wide angle lens, this is the sort of background blur that you can expect to get, and moving back from the subject itself, not very far at all, you're going to start to notice that everything really does come into focus. Okay, so this is Moondog Labs anamorphic lens, and again, like the other wide angle lenses, we're roughly about 100mm or 4 inches away from the light itself, and this is the sort of bokeh that you can expect to get using this anamorphic lens from Moondog Labs. So let's move it back a little bit further and see how this one performs. Okay, so this is the Moondog Labs anamorphic lens, and now I'm roughly about 1/2 meter away from the light, and you can see we're still getting a little bit of background blur going on there, so the shot's still looking quite nice, still being able to achieve a little bit shallow depth of field. So let's pull it back a little bit further and see how this one performs. Okay, so this is the Moondog Labs anamorphic lens. Now I'm roughly about 1 meter away from the light, and again, like the other anamorphic lenses, you can see that everything is pretty much now in focus in this shot. So once again, it performs just like the other wide angle lenses do. As soon as you get to roughly about 1 meter away from the subject, everything is in focus. There's no more depth of field being able to be achieved with these lenses. It's either tele lenses or the super telephoto lenses, I like to call them, from Case or B-Script. So there you go, guys. That was my little shootout with lenses there. As you could probably see, the main lenses that are going to give you the most shallow depth of field is the case 135mm or the B-Script 3x tele lens. Then jumping down into the telephoto lens that I used from Sandmark, this will be the same regardless of what brand you go for. So if you went for the Ulanzi 65mm or you went for the Siriu 60mm, or the Sandmark, or any other company, or the Moment 60mm or 58mm, they're all going to basically give you the same amount of background blur. So that's why I only used that one telephoto lens for this video, because regardless of what manufacturer it is, it's still the same focal length, so therefore you're going to get roughly the same amount of background blur. So then next up we had the wide angle lenses, and as you could probably see, when you get extremely close to that subject, you will get a little bit of background blur, but as soon as you move away past that ½ meter mark, the background is completely in focus. So again, in this video, just a quick one, it was just to basically show you which lenses are going to achieve the most background blur if that's the type of look that you are going for. So I hope this video has helped one of you out there decide on what type of lens you're going to go for. If that's the type of look you are looking for, then definitely that B-Script 3x tele lens or that case 135mm is going to give you the best amount of background bokeh or blur. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Peace.